feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled TIFF review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, I've got some good news.
What's
We've
up?
just been picked up by Praise the Lord networks.
Yeah, Christian. Yeah, we're just switching full Christian. We're going on TV. I don't have a Diet Coke, but I do have a Coke Zero Sugar.
Now, did you open it with a nail file, though?
I opened it with my nails. Or probably my finger, but
I mean, close enough, right?
You're a Diet Coke man too.
I am, yeah. I mean, it's more to do when I say health purposes. I mean, it's avoiding sugar, but I understand, the idiocy of saying that because it has aspartame.
Oh, it's just chemicals. It's all trash. Yeah.
It'll kill me faster that way. Instead of giving me diabetes, I'll get cancer. That's the trade-off.
Yeah, I know. I can't stop drinking delicious Coca-Cola Zero Sugar.
I right now just have a cup of tea,
Very nice. But yes, today we are reviewing Michael Showalter's The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which is now playing in cinemas. So one of those TIFF movies that premieres early in the fest and then comes out during the festival. And then you can even pay more money to still see it at TIFF while you could go to a Cineplex or a Landmark or AMC or Regal or wherever you want to go. European chain that I don't know about. Starring Jessica Chastain, Andrew Garfield, Cherry Jones, Vincent D'Onofrio, and more. Eric, how are you? We're done pretty much TIFF now.
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple of stragglers that will be recording reviews for this week as we're talking now.
Yeah, our coverage will continue into this week after the festival.
Yeah, with a wrap-up show and a couple more reviews for films like Bergman Island and Seven Prisoners. So,
Yep. But how are you feeling overall? Good?
Yesterday, again, as we're recording, this is a Sunday. I took Saturday mostly off and just kind of relaxed a little bit and watched Silent Night.
I watched a lot of Succession. And
are you caught up now? Are you on at the end of season 2?
I got 2 or 3 more episodes, so I'm almost there. And then I visited my dad for his birthday. But anyways, keep going.
How's Mike doing?
Good. We got there. He had a little tummy ache and he was napping, and I'm like, cool. But then, we just hung out. It was nice I told him about the humans and how it reminded me of everyone of my family. But
your dad was asking about Dear Evan Hansen, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. And I told him the truth. Anyways,
you just should have shown him the review.
Yeah, no, I linked him to the YouTube channel.
Dad, I love spending time with you, but if you truly care about me, you'll give me the
subscribe
the extra
and
hits.
Like, yeah, like, comment, subscribe, share. Sorry, but you watch Silent Night, which you'll talk about on the post show.
Yeah, which also actually, weirdly enough, to tie it back to Coke, has a scene where characters drink Coke in a very ominous manner.
I mean, One Night in Soho, also Coke very prominently placed. I mean, Coca-Cola has been around forever and is, prominent in everything. So
yeah, I prefer it over Pepsi. And I know, I get it, they're both basically the same thing, but
no, they're
not.
There's a difference. Pepsi
there is.
Sucks. I'm sorry. Everyone, hot take, Dune, not very good. Pepsi sucks.
Pepsi's just too sweet, I find, like regular Pepsi. And then there's something kind of off with the taste of Diet Pepsi, more so than Diet Coke.
I mean, I honestly, okay, now I'm backtracking already. I'm already flip-flopping. Diet Pepsi, I think, is not better than Diet Coke, but is almost a better representation or closer to the taste of Pepsi than Diet Coke is to Coke. And then I think that's why we have Coke Zero, which I like, because it's supposed to taste more like normal Coke, because there are people like Tammy Faye, to bring everything back so we can actually review this movie, who just like the taste of Diet Coke, which is why they don't fuck with that, I don't think.
Yeah. And I don't really have anything else other than that to say than like talking about Diet Coke and Coke, I think, is actually more interesting than really talking about this film. Which, to be honest, I actually think that there is some stuff in this film. We're talking about The Eyes of Tammy Faye, as Matt mentioned, directed by Michael Showalter, that are worth discussing. we haven't really talked yet about what we thought about the movie. I know you posted a tweet, but um, for those who are unfamiliar, this story is based on the life of Tammy Faye, and specifically the documentary with the same name that came out in 2000 and sort of chronicled the rise and fall of both Tammy Faye and her husband Jim Baker as televangelists, sort of reaching out to Christian America through television in the 1970s and 80s, and then their eventual fall from grace, if you will, to the point where, you know, you see two sides of them as people. A lot has been discussed already surrounding the transformation of Jessica Chastain into the role of Tammy Faye because of the makeup.
People love a transformative performance, Eric.
Right. Whether it be, you know, putting on weight or losing weight or sort of being covered up in makeup and being unrecognizable. When we talked about the trailer on the regular show, I even made a slight jab, not at the performance in the trailer, but at the makeup, you know, in the scenes that take place in the 90s, that Tammy Faye looked like the radiator woman in David Lynch's Eraserhead. You know, with the
good.
cheeks.
Good. I said a Dick Tracy villain, but yeah.
Yeah, no, and again, that's just, I think that comes with the territory when you're working with a younger actor and either aging them up or even using CGI, you know, to de-age them. And we've talked about that even with The Irishman. The good news is Chastain's performance is so strong that it does help to sort of set off some of that a little bit.
I agree.
Especially when the story is spanning 5 decades. The film sort of opens at the end of, you know, not her life per se, but the end of her reign and sort of dealing with the fallout in the mid 90s, but then flashes back to how she came into prominence in the 1950s as a child and grew up poor in Minnesota, then into the 60s and 70s where she meets Jim Baker, and the two not only become traveling preachers, but then kind of figure out that television, you know, the medium that it is the best way to exploit the masses. Tammy Faye is always portrayed as someone who is kind and compassionate to those in need, and Jim Baker, on the other hand, is conniving and manipulative, and your classic kind of slimy businessman who's using religion to manipulate,
gain fame and fortune.
Yeah. Exactly. And a lot of this sounds so much like, you know, a Martin Scorsese movie, where you think of like the classic gangster films that he makes, you know, whether it be Goodfellas or Mean Streets or The Irishman. And even though, again, Chastain's performance is the best part of this movie, and you can
probably
tell that
carries the movie to make it watchable.
Puts everything into this role, and she's also a producer on the film. Freckleface Productions is the company that, you know, she is the sort of owner of or co-owner of, and Freckles Film, pardon me. And she is the one that just totally kind of captivates you in every scene, even when, you know, you get to the 80s and early 90s where the makeup becomes more sort of dominant in
Eraserhead,
in the frame. But I almost felt that the thing that was miscast, or the hiring, was Michael Showalter, who is a filmmaker who is best known for collaborating on a lot of comedies, whether it be more recently with The Lovebirds or Wet Hot American Summer,
The Big Sick, which
Sick,
had a dramedy kind of vibe to it. Yeah.
But this almost feels like it should have been something, and I understand the cliche that will go along with it, pertaining to, you know, being faux Scorsese or Scorsese adjacent, is it almost felt like this should have been directed by Craig Gillespie.
I was gonna say the same thing, dude.
Yeah.
I exactly thought the same thing. Like, this movie wants to be I, Tonya, but it kind of just falls flat on
Cruella, right?
Yeah, on almost every level except for Chastain's performance. Like it becomes so watered down and so kind of generic that it just ends up like, yeah, you're there for Chastain, and every time she's on screen, you're like, oh, she is actually quite good. But whenever she's not, you're just like, I could not care about anything else in this movie. I thought Garfield was fine. I think he's more noticeable like every time, you know, he's on screen with his kind of bad prosthetics and um his performance just felt more like
It's more
he
mannered.
yeah. No, I
It
I agree with that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and it's also like your classic kind of slimy businessman who you can see, early on in their relationship, is always looking to sort of climb up the ladder and take opportunities where they fall. And he also gravitates towards television, but he can only do so
Mhm.
with her, because she's obviously a driving force and believing in religion as a tool to help others and to spread the word and to spread the gospel, where he is using it, but at the same time his agenda isn't necessarily as pure of heart.
Yeah, and I like that juxtaposition between the two and how he even manipulates her and you know, I do think that her intentions are in the right place, and I never think it vilifies her or even pokes fun at like her in like a way of like laughing at her or anything. And I just think, you know, she was kind of oblivious to everything happening because she was either in love or she just really wanted to help people, and no matter what, and she thought, you know, Jim was a way of kind of doing that, even though if he had his own motivations. But yeah, I just found the filmmaking to be super conventional, and that's what I mean. Like someone like Craig Gillespie, love him or hate him, like brings kind of an edge to it, or something that, you know, fits the material. Where I feel like Showalter here, like again going back to the makeup, it felt like the makeup in the Wet Hot American Summer series when he made himself Robert
Ronald
Reagan,
Reagan,
Ronald Reagan. Thank you.
which is
Um,
Ronald Reagan is also mentioned
in
throughout this
this,
in,
right?
in in the
Yeah.
portion in the
I'm surprised you
80s.
didn't play him. It's in the Wet Hot American Summer universe. That's like when he pops up as Reagan in Wet Hot American Summers, the kind of what the makeup looked like to me throughout. And yeah, I just felt it very conventional, where, you know, it was that kind of thing that I think me and you talk about a lot, where in biopics, where it's just kind of the greatest hits, like kind of skims on all of the big moments in their lives or the big moments that they have to kind of cover, and then never really picks one moment or one thing to really focus on, and then gives you the rest of the, you know, the nuance of who they were and their story kind of in this kind of focused um kind of over narrative. And then in this, it just feels like, okay, here's where it ends, let's go back to the beginning, let's go in chronological order, show you the big moments. The filmmaking is pretty standard. Okay, he's a bad guy, she's oblivious. It's just like, I don't know. And then the little seeds that they plant at the beginning that all come kind of full circle just feels kind of standard. And then it just, anytime Chastain wasn't on screen, I just found myself kind of going, whew, I just want her to come back, because that's the only thing keeping this train rolling for me.
Yeah, I mean, Abe Sylvia's script does do that classic thing where it's like, it pinpoints certain moments in, the life and times of this character, and sort of, okay, this is when they were, traveling around, and they went to a motel and they watched Pat Robertson on the TV, and, found that he wasn't really all that dynamic a personality, but what he was preaching was reaching a mass audience, even more so than having to kind of be that kind of classic traveling preacher, or in this case
Mhm.
a salesman. you know um what I do like about the script, and I think it does have some touches here and there, but it doesn't do it enough to justify the overall film of completely winning me over, is there is a moment early on where you see them leaving this kind of cheap motel, and the car that they that Jim has bought has been repossessed, and then they run into a producer for the Christian broadcast network. And I do feel like Michael Showalter there is trying to kind of add like a little sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of wink to the audience of like how ridiculous sometimes biopics are, where like how people
But
meet.
yeah, I agree, and I thought the same thing,
Like
and I
even the
kind
way
of.
that the sun kind of comes in the
But
corner of the
I don't
frame.
think it sticks to that though. Like
No,
I wish that
and
was
I
the
agree
tone.
with you. I
I
agree
wish
with
that was
you.
the tone throughout the whole thing. Where I was thinking of Walk Hard as
Yes,
I
yeah.
was watching this, and in that moment, and even the dad in this reminded I was like, is that the same
Frederick
actor?
Lane. So Frederick
Um,
Lane, you probably best know him from he was the police officer that was escorting Evangeline Lilly's Kate in Lost.
Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's
The
exactly it.
stepdad,
Thank you.
yeah.
But he also reminded me of the guy, the father from Walk Hard, and I
Right.
kept thinking like Devil's Hands and like the wrong son dad, and like Michael Showalter has that kind of tone that I feel like I know this is a real life story, but I feel like you could have satirized the biopic a little bit with this story, and what you're mentioning kind of gives a little bit of that, like a little nod to how kind of silly some things are when you have to kind of take artistic liberties and put a story together. But I never think it really commits to that. And there are some, I like the kind of the Christian network kind of using the old VHS kind of style, and there's some weirdness to all that stuff. But I was thinking of Walk Hard, and I'm just like, I almost wish they would have taken like almost an over the top kind of like still tell the true life story, but do it in a way that kind of pokes fun at biopics. Because when you kind of just water it down and just make it like any other biopic, even though you kind of had this ridiculous makeup and the tone is pretty serious throughout, and there's only a couple moments like that. But yeah, I'm with you, but I just wish they kind of stuck to that throughout, where I feel like that's the only real instance of a like little wink to the audience.
Yeah, and there's a couple other things that I did like pertaining to Tammy Faye's relationship with not just Jim Baker but her mother, and I think that
Hmm.
there's an interesting sort of
Cherry Jones,
parallel.
who just showed up in Succession.
Right.
That I
I
was
mean, who's a
watching.
great New York actor,
Yeah,
mostly known for theater, but when she's on screen and whether it be television or film, she's always a very commanding presence
I agree.
and
Yeah,
can be very cruel and cold and works kind of perfectly as, this mother who's trying to repent for her own sins, as we see in the beginning of the movie, and almost in the process is treating her daughter so poorly that through the rest of the film we see Tammy Faye seeking the approval of her mother and her mother's love. And I think that that is interesting in terms of the parallel between her relationship with Jim, where we see early on in their relationship, whether it be at school or when she first introduces him to her mother and stepfather, we see Jim defend Tammy in those two moments against the teacher teaching scripture and the mother kind of saying that your plans are a little bit flimsy, which I don't disagree with Cherry Jones's character, because she's kind of the voice of reason at times, asking questions that I think need to be asked, like where's the money coming from, and do you really think that this is what God would want in terms of prospering and what
yeah,
have you. But you see Jim, Andrew Garfield's character, come in and kind of defend her, and I almost feel that that's part of the attraction of what she saw in Jim, is that
yeah.
he was able to quote unquote speak for her, because she was too either timid or shy to do so, and always had to put up with the people that were controlling her, but to the point where she doesn't realize that Jim Baker is just as bad, and sort of where that story
Probably
goes.
worse.
Yeah, in terms of his sort of deceitful sort of ways, and sort of taking money from others but also not being true to himself of who he actually is. And all I could think of as well watching this was that Rhett and Link episode of Jim Baker's Doomsday Buckets, where he was basically like
That is
selling.
Jim Baker's stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't even put two and two together. And now that you're saying that, I'm like, that's exactly where I've heard this from.
Right. And
Heard
so
his
Jim
name from.
Baker has these like
Apocalypse kind
buckets
of.
where you can, like, they're basically like food that you can buy and rehydrate for your bunker. And Rhett and Link basically tried all of the food, and that's the only thing I could think of every time he was on screen, and it almost distracted from the performance, even though the performance is kind of just in support of Tammy Faye, which there's nothing wrong with that because it is Tammy
Mhm.
Faye's story, but it just kind of feels like, again, the performances around Chastain and the filmmaking doesn't match what she's bringing to the table. And if it were, I think you would have a better film.
Mhm.
And because of that, it is really just the Jessica Chastain show, which she's very good in the movie, and she always is usually. And it just, again, it feels like there was a missed opportunity here to
I
tell a
totally
really
agree. Yeah.
fascinating story about televangelism and the greed and glory that goes into it all and the manipulation. Like even the stuff, with Vincent D'Onofrio as Jerry Falwell Sr., who, again, really love him as an actor, and he is this intimidating presence. And I love the scene where they first meet him, or he's introduced at Pat Robertson's estate, and you know, um, Tammy Faye, being very savvy, goes to sit at the
At
table
the
with the
men's
rest.
table.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
boys club, right? And at that moment, you're seeing her assert herself a little bit more, or even when she is kind of pumping up Jim Baker to kind of push forward. I think that there is a savviness there, and that's also why I can't completely subscribe to the ideal of her being an innocent in terms
In all of
of
this.
the profiteering of taking from other people. I don't think Tammy Faye was.
Completely oblivious to it
No,
all.
I
Yeah.
don't. I honestly don't. I think you know she was a part of it. She might have been somewhat gullible, but at the same time, I
But
think that there
almost turned,
was
for
a
lack of a
blind
better term,
eye.
yeah, a better lack of a better term, turned a blind eye to it, and, like, that's kinda I get that vibe too.
Yeah, and I just feel that the film is maybe too easy on her in terms of that stuff, because again, it feels like, okay, well, look at the good stuff that Tammy Faye, she was an
Yeah.
advocate for the LGBTQ community within the Christian community, and trying to kind of bring a voice there, and not demonize those who had AIDS, because a large portion of this story takes place within the 80s, especially from 85 onward, where you have someone like Jerry Falwell talking about, like, gay cancer and things like that, and spreading these
Mhm.
horrible lies and misinformation, where she was an advocate for those who were practicing Christians, and still LGBTQ sort of members. And I think that is something that is worth sort of noting, and also looking at the idea of somebody who becomes a parody later in their life, whether it be on talk shows or
Right.
made fun of on, like SNL or something like that, and sort of taking a step back and being like, okay, how did we get to this moment in this person's life? And are they um should they be ridiculed the way that
Yeah,
they
is she
are?
deserving of that? Like, it's kinda
Right.
cruel, right? But
Right, where, like, if it was somebody like Britney Spears or Amy Winehouse, or even like Monica Lewinsky, who's been, in the news a lot
Mhm.
recently because
Of
of
Crime Story.
American Crime Story impeachment, where I think those women all deserve apologies for the media and the way that people not only made fun of them, but vilified them in a strange way. And especially when two of those women, one who which is dead, suffered from mental illness,
Yeah,
and were
no,
having
totally.
these very public breakdowns, and all that the media did was
Pile
basically
on
just
to them, yeah.
lampoon them, right?
Yeah, no, I agree.
And where Tammy Faye, again, like, I still she's still a human being. She was a human being. It's good to humanize somebody, not just look at them as a cartoon character, even though she is very larger than life and over dramatic. But I think that the movie is also very soft on some of the things that maybe she was complicit
Yeah,
in
no.
terms of fraud and financial gain.
I do not disagree, Eric, at all. And then talking about American Crime Story, I almost like I don't love Ryan Murphy, but he almost like his costume dramas, which I consider everything he does like a costume drama, because it is larger than life and everyone's in a wig and ridiculous clothing, even though it's like period accurate whenever he makes his stuff. Like his vibe almost fits this story more and would have brought even an edge to it that not I don't necessarily vibe with, but I almost would have thought suited the material a bit more if that makes any sense. If I don't
Right,
know if you
right. Well,
agree, but like,
it's like I mean, we've talked about this before, and especially like when it comes to like something like David O. Russell's American Hustle,
yeah,
where it's movie stars playing dress up,
yeah,
right? And it's hard to sort of break that illusion and sort of get invested in them as the character that they're playing, or especially if and again, Tammy Faye and Jim Baker were larger than life personalities, and so is televangelism in general.
of course, yeah.
But it just kind of feels like there's this great movie sort of underneath all of that, and maybe not focusing just on those two as sort of the
Hmm.
main focus, like just looking at it as a whole, I think would be interesting. But I
That's
also
true
wanted to
too.
quickly
Hmm.
mention, and I apologize to anybody, I didn't is the phrase turning a blind eye
Again,
problematic?
I'm just not necessarily like I've just to be completely honest, I'm trying to some ableist language, just trying
Right.
to basically do better of learning about these sayings and just seeing. So like I again,
Like
I don't
tone
want to.
deaf is another
Yeah,
one, right?
which again, some people argue being like, well, tone deaf is. I've tried to do research again, and doing this show just to be open with everyone is like, I try to kind of again think about what we're saying, and I don't think so, but
No, but
it's
I would like to
possible.
take that into account,
Yeah.
and also learn and sort of find new ways to talk about that.
Hmm.
And again, I mean, no offense to
No,
anybody,
I know.
and
I was the one who almost was saying that. I was trying to think of a better saying, or
right,
if
right.
that's all I'm doing, and I
But no,
think
no,
that's
no,
all
that's
we
good
can
to
do.
know as well, because
Yeah,
like again, like you want to grow and understand
and
that
advance your
there are
vocabulary and not rely on things that if
right.
other people, if it's even if it's unintended, which obviously it is, that it's just it's okay to go. Oh, is there a better way of saying that? So that's all I trying to do now, especially as we write reviews or talk and things like that. So,
Yeah, and that's
um,
always good to know, and
mhm,
to take that mindfulness. So
mhm.
moving on, I'll look for other words to say that are
No,
sort of
I don't think you
in
have to worry
tune
about
with
it, man.
that. But no, again, I think it's always good to have that talk.
Mhm.
The other thing that I do kind of find interesting, and I wonder about it, watching the scenes where she's recording her albums. There's this whole subplot of this kind of this affair that she's having with a music producer who left Nashville, going on this Christian path. And I do like that line. The one thing I did laugh at is like, this is the best work I've done since the Monster Mash album. And I thought that was funny. But what I thought was kind of interesting about that moment, in terms of, watching somebody who's not necessarily a musician, who's very much off pitch, I wonder if someone like Paul Thomas Anderson maybe saw, Tammy Faye on TV at some point at a young age, and took that and used it for Dirk Diggler in Boogie Nights,
Fair.
because it
Yeah.
almost has that quality where, like, especially where Dirk Diggler was in the 1980s, after his porn career, where, he's looking for other avenues to make money, and so he records that album, right? And
Mhm.
it kind of feels very similar.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I mean, there's a lot of people that do that, from actors to, athletes, everybody in between. But it just kind of felt very similar, and I'm sure maybe this film is maybe taking from that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Paul Thomas Anderson maybe saw something similar to that on TV and was like, oh, maybe I'll use that one day for something.
Yeah, no, I like that. But yeah, overall, I think Chastain is, as good as everyone is saying. I think she's, I think the one thing that kept me going in this movie, because every time she was on screen, I think she's fully committed, and even with the makeup and things like that, you do kind of get lost in her performance. Like I don't think you ever once, it's not just this kind of, oh, that's Jessica Chastain kind of just doing a over the top character, even though that's ultimately what it is, but you kind of lose yourself in her performance. And I think, that itself is why this movie is maybe worth a watch. But I just think everything surrounding it is just kind of
Mediocre.
mediocre. So I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of
I
5.
I will give it a middle of the road 3, because I've been throwing out threes and 3.5s
Yeah.
during this whole festival like it's nobody's business. And why should I change things? And again, there are some little moments throughout the script that are interesting. I just wish they dive further into them.
Yeah,
And again, I wish that the
I agree.
screenplay and the direction matched what Chastain was bringing
I
to the
agree
table.
completely. Yeah. Thank you all for listening. We have tons of TIFF reviews up right now, both on YouTube and podcast services. So if you're listening to the audio version, you want to check out the video version, go subscribe over on Untitled Movie Podcasts or Untitled Movie Reviews. You'll find us on YouTube. Subscribe, notification bell, all that jazz, thumbs up. We really do appreciate it. And if you want to listen to the audio version, it's at Untitled Movie Reviews. Eric and I review, sometimes 2 to 3 movies a week, whatever's coming out that week, but we have all of our TIFF coverage, and then we'll continue that for eternity, hopefully. So we'd love for you guys to check that out and continue listening or watching.
We should also mention that we have reviews for all three, the People's Choice winner, Belfast,
Yeah.
and the runners-up, Scarborough and The Power of the Dog, plus the Midnight Madness winner, T10.
Yep. And the documentary People's Choice, The Rescue.
Yep.
So we have reviews up for all of those films. So that's just part of our TIFF coverage. So go check those out and see what we thought, as well as Dune and other things I get mentioned. Thank you all for listening or watching. If you want a one-stop shop for everything Untitled, please go follow us over on Letterboxd, which is Untitled_movies. It's probably the easiest spot to get all that stuff we're talking about, whether you want the video, the podcast, see our star rankings, our averages between Eric and I's ratings, our personal profiles, all that jazz. So that's Untitled_movies over on Letterboxd. But as always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews at rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Coke or Pepsi are not a sponsor of the Untitled Movie Reviews.
But they can. They can
if
be.
they want, we will sell out.
I love Coke Zero.